How do you know you are called by God? When you have a mic, you shake the room. Or even when you're playing an instrument, you can pierce through people's souls. When you encourage someone, you can change the world. But can we really use those as key metrics to God's calling? Let's dive into it. Let's see what it really means to be called by God. First, to be called by God is to have a heavy burden to do a specific work. For example, you might be one that is interested in helping young men find their purpose. Or you might be one that have a heart for the orphans. When you are called by God, you will surrender your life to God and you will start living out God's purpose for your life. God's calling does not limit to a person, because God can call not only a person, He can call a nation. He can call a family. I want you to know today that every believer is called to serve God's kingdom one way or another. Some people believe to be called by God, they must be qualified. That's not true. It's a myth. No one is qualified when God calls them. Actually, God qualifies you for the job. So, we are called to grow in virtue. We are called to serve God by doing good works that were already prepared for us. And the good thing is that God gives us gifts to help us in our calling. God has given us many gifts. It can be faith, wisdom, knowledge, healing, discernment, prophecy, speaking in tongues, you name it. But these gifts are gifts that were given to you to serve God's kingdom and to help advance His kingdom. For example, Paul was called for a particular purpose. Paul was called to preach to the Gentiles. Peter was called as well. Jonah was called. He refused to surrender to the call. Instead, he ran the other way. But in God's mercy, God pursued Jonah in his disobedience. Every Christian has a calling on his or her life. We were designed before the foundation of the world to be His workmanship, glorifying Him as we bring forth the fruit He desires. When God calls you, like I said, it will be like a burden for a particular need. Some are called to be pastors, teachers, worship leaders, encouragers. The question is, when you know what you're called for, will you accept the calling? You see, many people are dying. Many people depend on our obedience to the calling of God over our lives. The more time we take to obey God, the more time we take to respond to God's calling, the more people are dying. The more people will suffer because of you. That's why it's important to be quick in obeying God. God will not change His mind at all. So it's for you to make up your mind and not for God to change His mind. Think about it. So many souls are waiting for you. I know you might think you're not ready. You might think you're not ready. You might think you're not qualified. You might think you're not equipped enough. But when God calls you, He will make provision for the call.